Ding dong, Donatel is gone. And yes, it's unfortunate. Donatel seems like a legitimately good dude, classy, respected by players and coaches alike, but the performance of that unit, someone had to have accountability, and so Donatel is gone. Now, yes, you could say that it's the talent of the players, but a good coach, a good coordinator is going to elevate the play of bad players to average, average players to good, good players to great, and we just didn't see that this season. So now we have 12. Potential Vikings defense coordinator candidates. Now, some of them are the run-of-the-mill, what you would expect, but some of them are just a little bit out there. So let's dive on in. First one is JEROME from the Broncos. Now, a lot of crossover with him and O'Connell with the Rams, and it does make some sense because I do think that O'Connell is reaching back to what is familiar, and Vero did a fantastic job with the Broncos this year, even though it was an unmitigated disaster with the Broncos and Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, but the defense was legit. The Broncos were 8th in PFF overall defensive grade this year. He is a head coaching candidate around the league, but if he doesn't get a head coaching gig now, it'll be interesting because the Broncos can block this move, right? So whoever the Broncos' new head coach is going to be, is it going to be Sean Payton? TBD. They can block Vero from going to the Vikings or even interviewing with the Vikings. But if the new head coach wants to bring in his own DC and allows Vero to walk, it would make a ton of sense here, even though it's a good problem to have because on one hand, Vero is probably going to be a one and done, maybe a two and done. This could be like another Mike Tomlin situation when he was DC of the Vikings in 2006. But I mean, you want that. Like, you want your coordinators to be future head coaches. You want them to be leaders. You want them to be experts at their craft. You want them to, well, first off, I mean, they're not taking coordinators from 4 and 13 teams and hiring them as head coaches generally. So if you're having success, it's part of the business. You're going to lose your assistant coaches. Next up, 1B. Raheem Morris, Rams defense coordinator. Now, I know everyone's saying, well, the Rams defense was garbage this year. The Rams were just a perfect storm of everything that could go wrong. Like Super Bowl hangover supreme. They had a bunch of injuries. And let's not forget, Raheem Morris coordinated the number 1 defense in the National Football League in 2021. And everyone talks about, oh, it was Cooper Kupp. Oh, it was Matthew Stafford. Oh, it was Sean McVay. Yeah, it was that. Oh, it was also Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips. But that defense was legit, man. Like Aaron Donald getting after Jalen Ramsey at his peak. But also Von Miller. That makes things kind of easy. But a lot of injuries on that side of the ball. Plus, we need to point this out. So I don't think that the Vikings will be shoehorned into hiring a coordinator with specific experience with a 3-4 or 4-3. Because I think the Vikings are in full teardown and rebuild mode, so it's going to be a blank slate. And whoever they hire as DC, I'm sure will have input in free agency, have input in the draft of whatever scheme that they want to run. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be a 3-4 guy, it doesn't have to be a 4-3 guy, etc. Next up, number 3, Gerard Mayo, Patriots inside linebacker. So, Patriots, which is kind of funny. So Super Bowl champion, leader. He's also getting some love as a head coaching candidate. He's also been bandied about quite a bit as a DC candidate for a long time. I think that Mayo would make a ton of sense here. He's highly respected. He's very aggressive in terms of his coaching style. So I think that would sync up pretty damn well with the Vikings. Next up, number 4. Sean Desai, Seahawks assistant head coach, also works with the DBs. Now, he was the Bears DC in 2021. Not so much, but I think that was more the Bears. And also their defense wasn't bad last year. But then there's like, hey, let's get rid of Roquan and Robert Quinn. Let's do that. But he is a hot name that comes up a lot in coordinator talks, also potentially in head coaching jobs down the line. I think he did great work with the young Seahawks secondary this season, particularly Tariq Woolen, who came in as a 5th-round pick and has just been an absolute monster. So I think that I would actually focus on potential DC candidates that have a defensive back background, because that's where the Vikings struggled the most. That's where there was the most communication issues, and that's something that has to get fixed. Next up, number 5, Jim Leonard. Now, Yes, effing Badger. It is what it is. But he was a tough, scrappy player in the league, formerly of the Jets. Crossover with Mike Patton there. He was his DC. Also with Rex Ryan, Kevin O'Connell. He was teammates with Jim Leonard for a couple seasons. And even though he didn't retain the Wisconsin job, I mean, Wisconsin was 20th in total defense in FBS this year, and that was his bread and butter. He's aggressive. He's exotic. He primarily works with the 3-4. So I think that even though Leonard... making that leap from college to the NFL. I mean, this isn't his first rodeo. Like a guy who's played in the league, a guy who's done work in the league. I think that would make a ton of sense here. Next up, number 6. Brian Flores. So Steelers assistant, former Dolphins head coach, already been getting some love for some defensive coordinator openings and requesting for interviews. I think that basically what happens is when you're a head coach and your specialty is one side of the ball, you want a head coach on the other side of the ball. Now, Zimmer tried to do that with Norv, did that with Shermer, did that with Kubiak, but I think Flores would make a ton of sense here, even though some of the lawsuit stuff, that really doesn't bother me. What matters to me is that, hey, do the players buy in? The players respect Brian Flores. I think that he's a solid defensive tactician, going back to his days with the Patriots. Also, his Miami defenses were pretty solid. So I think I will give him a shot here if he is looking to get back into the game as a coordinator. Next up, number 7, Corey Undlin, the Niners DB and passing game coordinator. Of course, the Niners DC is DeMeco Ryans, who's very much likely going to get a head coaching job this time around. Number 1 coverage unit in the NFL, number 1 defense, and the Niners have just been fantastic this year. Hufanga, the former USC Trojan, All-Pro, and Undlin. So it's interesting because he's from St. Cloud, so hashtag one of us. He's got a ton of experience in the league. He does have coordinator experience. He was the Lions DC in 2020, the final year of Matt Patricia. Now, the Lions defense was dead last in the league in yards and points, but also Undlin, he was more of a rubber stamp. Like Patricia was still the guy, so it's kind of whatever there, even though he got fired midseason. But I do think that this one does make a lot of sense. Again, a guy who's a part of the best defense in the league. Also, he's proficient at the place where you have the most deficiencies in the defensive back room. Next up, number 8. So Aiden Dirty, this guy is relatively young, so he's only been in the NFL coaching since 2018, but he's been a fast riser, former linebacker, journeyman, coached with outside linebackers with the Falcons, and then the last 2 years he's been the Cowboys' defensive line coach. Disciple of Dan Quinn, although if and when Dan Quinn gets a head coaching job, Dirty's probably going to be following him, potentially as his rubber stamp DC, but Dallas has a number 2 pass rush in the NFL, and you certainly can't ignore that. Next up, number 9, Vic Fangio. Now, I hear you. Like, well, Donatel is a Fangio disciple, so why would you want Fangio? Well, Brad Childress was an Andy Reid disciple. Would you want Andy Reid? There you go. So I understand it's going to be a similar defense, but it's going to be called more competently. It's going to be called more aggressively. That's what Fangio does. So Fangio's interviewing with the Falcons for their DC job. He may get it, but I think that they certainly should kick the tires and light the fires on Fangio if he is interested. Next, 10 and 11, 2 in-house guys. So Mike Patton, Vikings assistant head coach. Obviously, this one makes sense. I think if Donatel would have been relieved of his duties mid-season, I said duty, Patton would have made the most sense because he has play calling experience. He's got 10 years of head coaching and defense coordinator experience, knows the personnel, knows Kevin O'Connell, and is also uber aggressive. The way that he's called games before. 11, you got Mike Smith, Smitty, a Vikings outside linebacker coach, pass rushing coach, former Ravens outside linebacker, bounced around the league, worked his way up, bit of a Mike Patton disciple. I think that he's a young guy who's paid his dues. Also, him coming from a pass rush background, I think he's going to be super aggressive, which is exactly what the Vikings need. Again, if you're bereft of talent, pass rush is the greatest equalizer. The Vikings had that in spades, but they just could not get home. But also, maybe it's because the secondary couldn't cover anyone. I don't know. And lastly, you know what? If you want to get nuts, let's get nuts. I mean, Rex Ryan, he's making good money, making good coin, less stress. He's on ESPN talking a lot of junk, but you know that he's itching to get back in the game. Right, and of course, Patton has ties to Kevin O'Connell with the Jets. Mike Patton is a Rex Ryan disciple, so it makes sense there. And it's just like F it. Plus, family ties. So his father, Buddy Ryan, was a Vikings defensive line coach from 1976 to 1977. And what's interesting is that Bud Grant had a chance to hire Rex Ryan as their new defense coordinator. He went in a different direction. Rex Ryan got the Bears DC job, and then he implemented the 85 Bears 46 defense. And not that I'm bitter, but Buddy Ryan was formulating a lot of those techniques and schemes with the Vikings. So, I mean, the 85 Bears defense, now, no one should have ever heard of him. It should have been the 85 Vikings defense with Keith Millard, Chris Dolman, Scott Studwell, Joey Browner, Matt Blair. But, again, not that I'm bitter. Not that I'm bitter at all. But that's it. I'm sure there's going to be many more, but that's just a preliminary list shooting from the hip of who we like. What are your thoughts on our thoughts? Vikings defensive coordinator candidates, let us know in the comment section below. Subscribe for daily Vikings takes. Want to support the work? Put a little something in the Venmo. But till next time, Skol, production value.